back to Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, Veenu Keller. I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and Her Network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. As always, I have an amazing guest who comes to us all the way from Australia, the world we know as the world down under. And I'm really excited to have our guest because him and I got on a conversation and he was explaining to me about his story and how he created the Resilient Dad podcast. And when I was thinking about resilient dads, I was thinking about how resilient are we as parents? Like, what are we doing in our life to create the resiliency that we need to take forward into our parenting? So without further ado, I want to welcome Pat. Welcome to the show, Redefine Parenting. It's such an honor to have you here in the middle of the night.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us on your show. It's a privilege, and I look forward to getting into the conversation of resiliency in parenting.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, I know that resiliency is, for me, it's looking past the things that I've done wrong or shaming myself or feeling like I'm the worst parent or the worst person and being able to pick myself back up and keep moving forward with strength and compassion and, integrity. How would you describe resiliency for you as a parent?
I think you're spot on with your definition there. It's the ability to pick yourself back up, understand that mistakes are going to be made, not get down on yourself, and be able to learn from those experiences, and in turn, that gives the example to our kids that that you're not going to always get everything right from the start, and that in terms of to keep going and being able to consistently keep at what you're looking to achieve. And I think I was very fortunate as a child, having the situation I did with my upbringing, because my mum was definitely one of the most resilient people that I actually know, with her, what she had to go through with her journey, and then having a child at a very young age, have cerebral palsy through a medical accident. So I think as parents, showing our kids the example of resiliency through our own challenges is a great way.
Yeah. I agree. And, it's funny because I always look at, what my mom gave me. And as much as I always talk about the generational gaps, and we do need to allow ourselves to let go of that baggage, let go of the fact of how we were raised and raise our kids in the generation that they're into, right? However,
Yeah.
some of the things that I got from my mom too was resiliency. Watching my mom come to this country after having an arranged marriage with my father and then divorcing and then raising me and my brother on her own until my brother actually moved in with my father when he was a teenager. And I watched what she went through, working two jobs, putting herself through law school, and still being able to put food on the table, a roof over her head, and clothes on her back. To me, she was the definition of resiliency. She had everything against her, being in this foreign country, creating a new life for herself and for us kids. And so, I too would say that that's one of the gifts my mom gave me, was a front row seat to what resiliency is, and to not live in apologies. Like, don't live an apologetic life as a parent, just to kind of
Yeah.
look at where are we at and how do we move forward. So with your own story, you created the Resiliency Dad podcast. Tell us a little bit about how that even transpired.
Yeah, so through my own journey as a child, being brought up, my parents separated twice. First time when I was actually 6, then they got back together, and they finally separated when I was 13. And then, for me, the one thing that I promised myself as a kid was none of my children were going to end up in that same situation. And as they say, where the things that you most focus on, and the things that you're avoiding, that
Yeah.
you persist in. Um, and that's what happened with my first son, Christopher. His mother and I had found out that she was pregnant after we'd already broken up. So, the situation I didn't want occurred. And from that experience of a child and an adult, I had those challenges of co-parenting. It's probably not the most ideal way to start a co-parenting relationship. There's a lot of emotions and so forth on both sides. So through that, I've had to have that resiliency to keep persisting and not allow that to stop life in terms of being able to function day to day. Or still working, still being able to provide for my family, and so forth. So I think I was lucky in a way with my childhood giving me that skill set. But then with I guess the work that I was doing prior. So I was in construction and property for nearly 20 years. And I just wasn't necessarily feeling very fulfilled. Um, and I'd seen a few incidences that had happened here in Australia, where a parent, two parents, in a period of 3 months had taken their lives, and then also the lives of their kids, which is quite sad. So for me, I thought, no, there has to be a better way. And had, who knows what kind of upbringing those parents had, were they able to see through challenges in their younger lives to build that resiliency, to see that there is always a way through, the challenges and so forth. So once I'd seen those two incidences, for me, it was like, no, I need to do something more meaningful in my life. And that's why I started, Resilient Dad.
That is so amazing. And it's interesting. Like I always tell people, if your why doesn't make you cry, it's not your why. And it looks like, through our time in our life as we grow up, situations show up in our life, which really give us that. I don't know. I always think of like a slingshot, like this like pushes us forward to say, yeah, this is what we need to do. It's
Yeah,
for me to be able to give kids a childhood they don't have to heal from comes from the fact that I don't want another child to not know that they're worth it. I don't want another child to feel like they don't belong and that they're not loved. I don't want another child to ever contemplate suicide. I think that, when we have children that are contemplating it, or feeling like they don't belong, they grow up to be adults that have suicidal tendencies. And
yeah,
we look at that as a coping mechanism that, and I know because I was there. I was that person that felt like, you know what, when I'm done and I've raised my kids, I'm out. Like I always felt that that was going to be my way out. So I didn't have to
yeah,
suffer anymore. I didn't have to feel like I didn't belong anymore. And to be honest, it was the my own resiliency that kept me going to say, you know what, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to dust myself off, and I'm going to keep going forward. And being able to go to a personal development event to realize that I have the opportunity to write my own story. And
yeah,
what do I want my story to look like? Not just for me, but raising my children as well. What do I want my story to look like for them? And how do I want to
mm,
show up as a role model? Because it's like you and I started out this show saying that, you and I both saw our parents, our mom, having that resiliency to show us how to go forward, even when everything could be against them. They still go forward to raise us children to be who we are today. And so it's interesting how, watching what you watched with those parents that committed suicide and took the lives of their kids, and watching what you were going through with the whole co-parenting, you know, it's like what catapulted you forward to say, I want to create this. So what is your, with the resiliency dad, what is that? Like, what do you want to teach parents? I mean, and I know that you say dad because you're a dad, so you speak from your own
yeah,
experience.
correct.
And we have moms listening on here. We have grandparents, we have aunts and uncles. What is it? What's the message that you want to give people through your podcast, through your speaking, through your coaching?
that challenges are actually blessings. They're opportunities, and if we can have that mindset, then our kids can also see that the challenges that they're going to have in life, they're actually opportunities and signals that there's an area for an improvement. There's an area in yourself. Always looking within yourself first to see what is it that I not necessarily what are the skill sets that I need to obtain, or is it, even with, raising kids, it's like patience. That's one of the biggest things that I've, learned so far with my kids, that in terms of, that's the biggest challenge. It's having that ability to have that, I see that patience and compassion and empathy as part of resiliency, because it's being able to control myself, my own emotions, and being able to work through it, in a productive way, instead of letting my emotions control the outcome of the situation, and being able to look within first, and then be able to see how can you actually contribute to make the situation better. And gratitude. I, for a very long time, was not in the place of being grateful for the things that I had in my life, or my own
Mhm.
experiences as a child, or even my son's mother. Because there are a lot of great things that she does. She looks after our son when obviously he's not with me. So there are a lot of things you can be grateful for if you really take the time to have a look.
Right. I love that. So he's saying for the listeners out there, like, look within, look within yourself and see what's there. Be that role model for your own child. And gratitude. I love that. I talk about gratitude a lot on this show because I think that it always comes back down to that. And one of the things that you said, Pat, that I really, really loved is that, you help people to see things as an opportunity, you know
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that I thrive myself on as a coach when working with parents or working with the kids, is like helping the individual see that this isn't really a problem, this is an opportunity, and how to flip it and reframe it into an opportunity. Finding the gifts, that's the other thing I would say, is like, what are the gifts that show up in our lives in that moment, you know
yeah,
um and being able to be vulnerable enough to talk about it to our kids. Because if we are hiding and we're putting on this, like, this air of being strong and confident and nothing gets us down, how will our kids ever start to realize that life is not always going to make you strong, nothing gets you down? It's being able to face those challenges in those moments, to say,
yeah,
you know what? I am falling at my knees and I need help. And it is okay to ask for help. And the difference is, I don't stay down, I get back up. And being able to show our kids that is what resiliency is. Resiliency doesn't mean that I'm going to power through and I'm just going to be strong the whole time. Resiliency to me is having those vulnerable moments to share with your children, and for them also to get the lessons out of it.
yeah. And you're saying being vulnerable and being that example to them. For me, for a very long time, even the thought of saying sorry to my own kids. That my kids are so young. They're 6, 3, and 1.5. Um, and to my 3-year-old, apologizing when I'm not demonstrating the leadership that I want, um, so that he sees that, okay, well, if Dad's can say sorry, then that means that in terms of he makes mistakes, and it's not just me, that I'm being told that I need to say sorry for whatever, something that he may have done, and seeing the opportunity in not necessarily doing everything for them, and allowing them to trip up, and not necessarily succeed on the first attempt, and just helping and guiding them through. I'm always looking for the opportunity with my boys.
I
If
love it.
whether it's riding a bike, and my little one's like, I, I'm hurt, and it's like, okay, let's assess. Are you okay? Yep, all good. Let's get back on. Let's keep going. I'm not gonna carry your bike home. You wanted to ride your bike. We're gonna ride your bike to the park, and you're gonna ride it back. but we're going to make sure you're all right. You're good. Okay, let's get back
I
on.
I love that. It's like, they say when you fall off the horse, you got to get back on again. Don't
That's
fear
it.
the thing that you fell off of. You know, I
Yeah,
say fear the fact that you don't want to overcome it. That's where I would fear. Like, what is stopping
yeah,
me from wanting to overcome it? And I love that you do that. You okay? Great. Let's get back on. And I'm not carrying your bike. I love that. And I think I love it so much because I'm like that too. Um, Even like walking the dog, like my husband and I a few weeks ago, we were like, oh, it's early in the morning. Let's take the dog for the walk. And halfway there, the dog is like, like panting. And I'm like, I mean, I'm not ready to turn around. And the dog, like, I'm not going to carry the dog. you know, he
yeah,
wanted to come with us because he did. He was running after us. So we're like, okay, well, we'll take you. So, I didn't carry the dog back. Either did my husband. Like the dog went with us for the walk, and then we turned around. And he came back, and he drank his water when he got home and kind of passed out for a little bit. But again,
yeah,
it's like installing this in our kids and our animals. It's like when you start something, you need to finish it. Because where will
yeah.
this play out in their lives as an adult? My listeners have heard me many, many times. This is our boot camp with our kids, right? This is our chance to show them how to prepare them to get ready to be an adult. What's going to happen when you walk out that door and you're ready to be that adult after 18,
Mm,
going to college, living on your own, getting a job. Have I prepared you? Have I taught you resiliency? Have I taught you to start something, you finish it? Have I taught you to take pride in what you do? You know, don't be
mm,
sorry if you're going to keep doing it again. Be aware of what you're doing so you can change it and then be sorry. These are the things that I want to install in my children as well. And I was even, talking to my kids this morning about, just because I don't wanna be around, my kids when they're being disrespectful or they're not being nice to me or they're not being nice to each other, doesn't mean I don't love you. And I use this example. I said, if there was a kid at your school that you really, really liked and you really saw the good in them, but they always treated you bad. They always disrespected you. They always said things to you that weren't nice, you know, would you want to be around them? And they both said, I wouldn't want to be around them. I said, but could you still like them? Because maybe you saw their greatness. And they're like, yeah, we could
mm.
like them, but we wouldn't want to be around them. I said, so could that be true? Could that be true here? Could it be true that I love you? And when you're not being nice to me or you're not, being grateful for what has been provided for you, is it okay to step aside and say, I don't want to be around you right now? And it made them think. They're like, well, yeah. And I said, "And could I still love you though? Could I still see your greatness in you though?" And they're like, "Yes." And immediately
Great
I said,
example.
"So what would you wanna change?" And they're like, "Well, I'd want that person to be nice to me. And if that person was nice to you, what would happen? I would wanna be around them." And I said, "So what would have
Mm,
to change?" And they said, "Mom, we would have to be grateful. We would have to be grateful for what you do. We would have to respect you and not tell you no when you ask us to do something."
yeah,
What an amazing opportunity for me to use that example with them, right? That we may not
yeah,
like the way people treat us, and we don't get what we deserve. We get what we tolerate. If you continue to tolerate for someone to treat you bad, treat you disrespectfully, not be grateful for what you do to help them or aid them, you have a choice to continue accepting it or to walk away,
mm,
And to
yeah.
me, again,
It's
that's
very important.
resiliency.
Yeah, and that's a very important lesson, to be able to teach our kids because our behavior patterns are ingrained from as a young child. The conditioning that we have to see what's acceptable and what's not, and what an amazing gift to give to your kids that opportunity to see that just because someone doesn't mean that you don't care for them, or doesn't mean that you don't love them as their mother. But if they're doing something that you don't necessarily agree with and don't believe is the right thing, that you don't have to accept it. And I know, unfortunately, that was one of the things that I always was a pleaser. So for me, it was like it didn't matter what necessarily someone did. If I felt that they were a good person or they had the right intentions, then that's okay. But it's not. and I'm not actually helping that person either by tolerating that behavior, because that's allowing them to believe that that behavior is okay as well.
Right, and it's the setting boundaries, right? It's like, I'm allowing my kids to know that I am worth it. I am
Mm,
worth being respected. I'm worth, feeling, seen and heard to my own kids. We're always like, "Oh," and I teach this when I'm coach is like, "Do you see and hear your kids?" And I also teach kids, "Do you see and hear your parents?" Because we do not need to forget for 1 minute that we also are human beings that
mm,
need love. We still need to feel supported. We still need to be seen and appreciated. We still need to feel we belong as your parents in this world with you and that we are loved. And so we can role model it to our children, and we could also teach them about setting boundaries. I don't want my kids to be a pleaser. If my kids feel against something, then I want them to be able to voice that and yet be open to hearing what else could this mean? Is it an opportunity to change my mind about how I see that? Or is this something that I really believe in because it's crossing my boundary? And, it's also important for me because I also teach this, is that making sure that my behavior and my actions aren't scarring my kids where they're going to grow up and be like, I remember when I was 10 years old, my mom's like, nope, not today. I'm not going to be around this today. And then feeling like they weren't good enough. So that's why I
yeah,
make it very clear to them. It's not that I don't love them. It's not that I don't want to be around them. What I choose not to be around is someone who's disrespecting me. What I
yeah,
choose to not be around is someone who doesn't value me in that moment. And then
yeah,
teaching them a different dialogue of communication to say, Mom, I can appreciate you want me doing this. And right now, I'm doing XYZ. So can I please do it later? Versus coming at me going, no, I'm not doing it, blah, blah, blah. And again, just being vulnerable on the show, because I think that people need to know that even though you and I are, parent coaches, we're coaching people, we're doing podcasts, we're teaching, we still go through our own challenges with our own kids. And it gives us the opportunity, right? The opportunity, not the challenge,
yeah,
the opportunity to see what we can do differently so we can help parents say, you know what, number one, you're not alone. I'm a parent of
no,
6 kids. I promise you, I go through what you go through in my lifetime. And yet I reflect on it and say, how could I be a better parent today? What is going on that I need to teach my children to be different and respect and know that there's no one else on this earth that's going to love you more than your father and me. Like
yeah,
we're that we feel as parents, we would die for our kids, right? We would do whatever it takes to protect them. And I want my kids to be grateful for that. I want my kids to appreciate that, not disrespect us, not take it for granted, and not feel entitled.
yeah. Uh, and that's a great point. Of our kids not feeling entitled, that they just deserve to have whatever they want, or everything's going to be given to them, and leading by example. So one of the things that I always ask myself is, the actions that I'm about to do, is that the example that I want to leave to my kids? Would I be
Mm,
happy with them behaving in that way? And that helps me check myself to see, am I in line with what I believe, you know, I want to, the example I want to lead as a father, to my boys. Because one day, if they have the opportunity to be fathers themselves, I want them to be able to already have those, those values and the beliefs that they have on what they believe in terms of what a father should be, and to not have any, I guess, like you said, traumas passed on from their childhood.
right, right. My older boys, when their father and I divorced, and he got stationed in California, and we were still in North Carolina, that he didn't have an opportunity to see them a lot, and the distance got further and further. And you know, I remember telling my kids, I said, your father did the best that he could with what he knew, because his father was even more absent than he was, right? So in his
Yeah,
mind, and it goes back to definition, right? So he felt he was doing better than his father did with him. Like, at least he's in contact with you. At least he reaches out to you, where his father didn't. And now I get to see my son be a father to my granddaughter who's 5, and he's an amazing father. And it's almost like, you're either going to pick up where your father left off and continue that,
Yeah.
or you're going to go to the other end of the spectrum and say, you know what? I know what it felt like to not have my father there. So what do I need to be like for my child now? And so
Yeah.
sometimes, we and people have probably heard this many times from different people, but you're either part of the solution or part of the problem, you
Yeah.
know? And one thing that I want my kids to know is I do everything I can to be part of that solution. And there's times that I feel that maybe I am part of the problem. And so again, it's like you said, you check yourself, you check yourself, you ask yourself a better question, and one of the questions that I tend to ask myself is this going to take me towards what I want or away from what I want? And in that
Yeah.
moment of what I'm wanting is to be a better parent. I want to set an
Yeah.
example for my kids. I want to create that space so our children know that there's an open, safe, and trusting space for them to share. And I know my daughter even said the other day, she goes, I just want you to be joy, mom. Like, can you just be joyful? And in my mind, I'm joyful, right?
Yeah.
So I said, well, what would that look like? And she's like, I don't know, just joyful. Isn't that funny? She doesn't know what that would look like.
Yeah.
But to her, all she knew is she wasn't seeing that in me. And so
Yeah.
again, it gave my daughter an opportunity to understand in that moment. We all have different understandings, meanings, definitions of different words. And if she's not able to communicate to me what that looks like, then we need to explore that, because I'll never be able to give her what she wants when I'm not sure through her definitions, through her filters, what that looks like. So for the listeners out there, please ask your kids, what does that look like? What does it mean? What would they want to see in you that they're not seeing? Because maybe you think you're doing it, but through their eyes and through their filters and definition, they're not able to receive it because it's not the way that they would define it. So that's just another, strategy, if you would, of, how do we become resilient? First of all, we need to figure out what is it in the areas that we're lacking in our parenting? And the only way we're going to realize that is by asking our kids as well. Would
Yeah.
you?
I definitely agree with you. And being able to discuss things and even like asking the questions to your kids so that they start to think about what is it that this actually means, or what's actually happening, and that's only really something of late that I've really made an effort with my 3-year-old, because I've realized that how young he's actually understanding things, and that I need to not treat him like a little toddler anymore, because he's not a little toddler, um, and having that ability to have those discussions and ask him, what, why do you think this happened, or how do you feel about this, or do you think that it was okay to behave in that way? Um, so yeah, asking questions to kids is definitely a great way, and it gives them an opportunity to express themselves instead of being just they perceive that they're only being dictated to,
Right.
um, and that grows that relationship and that bond, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And my kids are older, right? My youngest are 10. So now I'm always asking them, like, what is the outcome of your behavior right now? What is it that you're really wanting? Because behaviors speak to us. No matter what
Mm,
behavior your child's having, it's speaking to us. It is telling us a need that needs to be met. And we have to kind of sift through it, if you would, to figure out, how do I meet this need in a productive way without rewarding that behavior? Because if I reward that behavior, then that's going to be a clue to them, like, this is what I need to do to get this met. And that's
yeah,
not really what we want. We don't want that negative behavior that, irritates us, that's inappropriate or whatever, right? We want to redirect it. Um, one of the things that I would also say to build resiliency and I have a 6-week course called Crack the Code to Parenting that, if any of the listeners are interested, they can go to my website and check it out. In one of the weeks I talk about, I believe it's week 2, about letting go of your own baggage. You know, we are parented by our parents in a different generation. We create these meanings of what life should be and how kids should be from the way that we were raised. And I always say the metaphor is like we kind of put that in a suitcase. And as we travel on to the next stage of our life, we continue to bring that suitcase. And in that suitcase, we're constantly putting more and more into that suitcase from our past as we bring it forward into our life. It's time to let that baggage down. It's time to let go of the baggage, let go of that suitcase, and see life through new filters. And what I mean by that specifically is I was definitely spanked when I was little. I was definitely grounded when I was little because that was the way that my mom knew how to feel like she was still in control as the parent, that we weren't just you know, she would call us vagabonds, like living off the street, doing whatever we wanted, that there was
Yeah.
control in the house and that we were very respectful to our elders. That was like a non-negotiable in our home. So I carried that and I felt like, that's what you need to do to have respectful kids because I was respectful. So I have to be that way to my kids. And I can tell you the ramifications for that because that's what I did with my older kids. I didn't spank them, but I yelled a lot and I grounded them. And I constantly, when cell phones came out, I definitely took their phone away. And all it did is make them resent me and it made them scared of me. And as
Yeah.
much as I thought my kids were talking to me and telling me everything, there was a whole heck of a lot that they weren't telling me because they were afraid. They were afraid of the consequences. They were afraid to get in trouble. And what I realized when I had the twins with my husband, um, that I had to let go of that baggage. I had to realize that creating my kids to be scared of me in order for them to respect me was not what I needed to do. And it was allowing myself to put down that baggage and become the parent my child needed me to be. And hence, that's why I call my show Redefine Parenting. It was that moment, that pivot that I had to redefine how I parented. And honestly, that was probably my biggest pivot in my life that I realized how resilient I was from my childhood and how strong I was and courageous I was to pivot in the way I parented, to be the parent my child needed me to be able to hear my child, see my child, and recognize the behaviors they're having in order to get a need met and be able to shift and provide what their need was in a way that the behavior didn't get rewarded. And it's huge. It's really huge when we start to realize that how much baggage we really do carry from our childhood. And it's something that you said before about your mom is that you saw how resilient she was and you were able to adopt that. So again, it's not letting go of all the greatness that we've seen in our parents, but it's I guess you would say readjusting to where we're
Yeah.
at today.
Yeah. And I love your baggage analogy because that's something that someone asked me like, would you continue to carry, all the stuff from the past through your whole life? And like you said, you keep adding new things to it, and the bag gets heavy. So
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to actually let it go of all the things that no longer serve you, and just be able to like you said, redefine who do you want to be. You don't have to be what you were taught necessarily, because that's what our parents knew based on what was available at the time. And you know it does take a lot of courage and effort and strength to be able to do the things that you're mentioning, having looking at things through different eyes, not taking the easy approach of, whether it's yelling or screaming, because that's just the easy option. But the outcome actually doesn't, you don't get what you actually want.
Mhm.
Because your kids, like you said, they become fearful of you, and they're not going to be open to come to you at times of where they may get themselves into trouble, or where you really want them to be able to feel comfortable that they have that relationship, that you're not going to scorch them because they've done something wrong.
Right. And I like what you said also is like to be okay to say sorry to your kids, to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what? I know I lost my mind today and I know that I yelled today and you know, and I used to say that, yelling was just an opportunity to be seen and heard because that is true. Like we do yell. Why do we raise our voice? Because we're not being heard. So we're going to take it up a notch, right? We're going to take it even louder so we're heard and we're seen.
Yeah.
And I've also realized even more recently that yelling also is a release. It's a release of energy that has been, you know, pent up in us, if you would, for so long, and things start to stack. They start to stack in us. And sometimes as parents, our kid does one thing and we're like, "Okay, let's not do that again." And then they do something else, and then that stacks. And then they go back and do what the first thing, and then it's just that stacking effect and stacking effect, and where we get so upset that finally it's kind of like that volcano. It just blows our top and we just come out full force because yes, we want to be seen and heard, but we also want to just release that energy that's inside of us. So, you know, when I am learning myself as I'm on this journey of being a parent still, is resiliency also is taking ownership for my own behavior, recognizing the effect that I wanted it to have. And is there a different way to do it without taking away from my children or without making my children fearful of me and yet still having that impact of
Mm.
getting them back on track or getting them to realize and take ownership of their behavior? I'm curious if you also have any, with the journey that you've been on and recognizing with the whole co-parenting and then being married and having, more children, what have you recognized for your own self on this journey? In the sense of creating more resiliency in yourself.
It's those opportunities like you're mentioning where you'll be asking a child for something and they're not necessarily listening. And it's for me, I see it as and I look at it in from the perspective of working out or going to the gym. For your muscle to grow, you need to break that muscle, and then you're able to do one more rep or increase the weights. So it's every time that I try and put it as a game for myself. So I don't go into the space of anger and seeing everything as, okay, I can either, if I'm so busy, what's the most important thing, for me? It's to be the best, husband, father that I can be to my family. So the only reason that I'm not necessarily putting the effort and time in is because I'm worried about something else that I need to
Right.
do because I'm so occupied. And this actually happened to me last Saturday. I'd planned to do some work during the day, but my son was playing up after breakfast, and I was like, okay, I can either go do what I need to do, or invest his time to actually spend it with my son to work it through his what he's going through at the time. Um, and for me, it helped me to, and it's taken many attempts for me to get to that point, but to say, okay, the only reason that in terms I'm getting frustrated and angry is because I've got maybe something else, or there's other things, but what's the most important thing to me? And that was an example on the weekend with my 3-year-old, with my son in Melbourne, who's 6 now. We Skype every 3 times a week, and
Nice.
sometimes we'd talk for ages, and sometimes it's literally like, "Hi, Dad, I gotta go watch TV. Love you, bye." So it'll be like 5 seconds, and I used to get really upset about it. Where now it's like, you know what? I'm grateful for the 5 seconds that I got to speak to him.
Mhm.
Um, he's a kid. I wouldn't, what can I actually expect of a 6-year-old, to have a full on conversation with me um, over Skype? So, it's, and having those that perspective of gratitude instead of being expecting it, for the situation to be a certain way. And that's the opportunity that co-parenting and the situation that I'm in has given me to be able to build that resiliency and, you know, to be that father that I want to be.
Right. You know what I think is beautiful about that? I my hallucination would be that, like, if you didn't have those regular Skypes and there were so far few in between, he would take every moment he could to be on that Skype with you. But the fact that he just knows that dad is there for me and this happens all the time, that, you know what, I'm gonna watch TV today. Dad, I love you. Thank you for calling, but I gotta go. It shows you that even though you have so much distance between you guys, is that he still knows you're there for him,
Yeah,
because if not, he would be clinging on to every moment that he has because he's
yeah,
not sure when the next moment would come.
yeah,
But because he's so quick and fast at times, he just knows, well, there's going to be another moment. How
yeah,
beautiful that is to be so far from him and still him recognize and know that his dad's there for him.
yeah. And that's all that's the main thing for me. And that's all I could ask is that he knows, regardless whether we don't live together full time, that I'm always there. And I think that's the most important thing for kids is to know that your parents are always there, regardless of what's going on. Whether it's you're living with them full time or you're in a co-parenting situation that I'm in.
Right, right. And I can fully appreciate that. I have 2 stepdaughters that, live quite a few hours away from us, and now that they're older, we're seeing less and less of them because that just happens in life, right? Like, your kids get older,
Yeah,
friends get important, and the fact that all their friends are over there, they don't have any friends here, it becomes a challenge. But what the one things that I love about my husband is that he still connects. Like, he's constantly FaceTiming with them, and it's learning to maneuver through that and take away any of the guilt that the kids feel because, well, I feel bad because I haven't seen you, but I have to work, or I want to go out with my friends, or, it's homecoming, or whatever it is. And, and as much as it hurts, and I'm sure it hurts you too, it's letting go of that and just appreciating that they took the minute to talk to you. They took the minute to be there with you. And it's more important for my husband to get rid of his daughter's guilt of not being here than it is to say, well, I'm hurting and whatever. And I love that about him. I love that my husband continues to connect with his girls, even though they're, a distance away and we don't see him as much as we used to when they were little. So
yeah,
I think there's so much of that in our children's life that's important, especially when you are co-parenting with someone else. There's different values, there's different ideas being, you know, spoken of, living by. And so it's coming together and, just being the best you can be in that moment for your child and letting them just knowing that they're going to soak up what they need to soak up in that moment with you,
yeah.
you
No,
know.
it's yeah. It's perfect in terms of what you said with the way that your husband's are able to still have that relationship and connect. It's not about him, and it's about him being the best dad that he can be for his daughters, so that they know that he still cares. Um, and at the time of need, I'm sure that they'll go to him because he's always been there.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, honestly, that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with him is how important his daughters were to him and
Yeah,
seeing the effort that he put in all the time, whether it was allowed or not. He never stopped, always pursuing to see his girls and be with his girls, and I fell in love with that. Like, someone that can love his kids so much is definitely capable of loving, right? And so
yeah,
when I was dating him, I was like, "Wow, like, this is amazing how dedicated he is to his girls," you know? He always put them
yeah,
first. So, again, we're talking about resiliency, and resiliency shows up in many facets of our life as parents, as individuals, in our business, you know, and it's so important to know as parents that we are going to fall. We're going to fall a
yeah,
lot. And resiliency comes down to, you know, it's when is it time for you to get up and dust yourself off and do it again? You know, I think it was great about what you explained about that story about your son falling off his bike. And it was like, "Well, I'm not gonna carry it. You know, you're good? You're good? Okay, we'll get back on it because 'cause you're riding it back home."
Yeah.
What a beautiful metaphor of what resiliency is, you know?
It's yeah, and giving your kids the opportunity to build that muscle from a young age. I think it's so important these days because I don't think the opportunities there are enough, or it's seen as an opportunity. It's seen more as a problem, or you know an issue than an actual opportunity to build that strength.
Right. I couldn't agree more. You know, even with, like, my kids at school, um, you know, they get I we just got their progress report, and I was, like, talking to them in the car, and I said, "You know, if you're happy with these grades, then rock on," you know? "And if you're not, it's up to you to figure out what you need to do differently to get your grades up," you know?
Yeah,
And because I want my kids to know, like, again, it's building resiliency, like, you don't have the grade that you want. Are you gonna sit with it and accept it, or are you gonna grow beyond it and say, "You know what? I'm obviously not putting everything I got into this." And if you are, then how do you ask for help? Because you're missing the boat on something.
mm,
And what are you willing to do to take ownership? I really, you know, ownership is so important to me, and especially as my kids are, you know, double digits now, they're 10, almost 10 and a half. It's time to start teaching ownership, you know. And it's interesting because like I said, it's a journey, and I wish that I knew back when they were like 2 and 3 what I know now. It's
yeah,
teach ownership even at a younger age, you know. You know, if the siblings are fighting, okay, great. I I could appreciate that that did not feel good for whatever your brother did to you. Tell me what you could have done differently, you know? So they learn to take any part of the ownership that they can. And again, as I was saying today, is like teaching them now, how do you set boundaries of what you're going to tolerate and what you're not? If your brother is disrespecting you, don't sit there and fight with him. Don't sit there and give in to him. Set your boundaries and say, I'm choosing to not be around you at this moment. You know, so it's setting boundaries, it's teaching them to not tolerate things that do not, you know, align with who they are, and it's teaching them ownership. These are definitely skills that will help your child to also be resilient. So, you know, Pat, we have a few more minutes left. Is there anything that you would want our, you know, our listeners to hear, to know, some nuggets that you can leave them with?
just to lead by example, and your kids need to see you, be resilient, or not give up on the things that are challenging, so that they can see that a challenge is an opportunity, and to give them that opportunity to build that muscle, and not necessarily just always find the solution for them. Give them the opportunity to find the solution, and connect with them so that they feel safe in that space. And I love what you're doing with redefining parenting. I'm grateful that my kids are so young, but there's always so much to learn. So I love what you're putting out there, and it helps me. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pat, so much for being on Redefine Parenting. And I'll tell you, you know, there's not enough of us out there that are being vulnerable enough to share our experience and to teach other parents as we're learning ourselves, right? Like, I just want to say to parents, we're in this together. It takes a village. You're not doing anything wrong. I'm not doing anything wrong. And there's always another level. One of my mentors, he says, you know, there's always another level. When you think you've reached that level, there's always another level. So, you know, be open to saying what else. And as I always say, be curious, not critical. It's the only way we'll be able to give our kids a childhood they don't have to heal from. So, if you are finding value in the conversation here on our show, please join our Redefine Parenting group on Facebook for even more tips and conversations. Do someone you know a favor and share my group with them as well, so they too can hear what they need to in order for them to feel supported in their own parenting journey. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.